Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at @it'sjustino, and we're doing a live Q&A. We're supposed to be previewing our match, but it's been postponed. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we're actually just going to do something a little bit not different because it's not like we've never done it before, but I don't think we've done a Q&A in a while, and I haven't had a guest for one in a while. So I'm going to bring George in just a second, but let's all just laugh at Tottenham for a second. I knew they were going to lose that game. I knew it. And it's just a great day whenever they lose, It's just they get battered everywhere they go, and they were ass. And Conte was like, I don't know if he was just looking at what he had, but I could have told him that before he took the job. Team is booty. The team is booty. What are you guys doing? It was great. It was nice. But I pretty much predicted that Chelsea were going to win that game, and it was going to be pretty easy. That's the first time that Spurs had to play against a team with all 11 men that had a decent squad out there. So it is what it is, but we can all laugh at Spurs for a couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and bring George in so we can get started, but Q&A style, we are going to touch on the League Cup first and then kind of go into some transfer stuff. So if you guys want to drop questions about transfers, feel free to do so. And yeah, without further ado, hey, George.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good. I cannot complain. Spurs lose. Feeling good. Love it.
Well, how did you feel? Because I must have been looking at a different timeline discourse about the whole situation because I was going into the game, right? And I'm hearing, Conte's going to really give them a run for their money. It's the best time to face Chelsea, and I'm just sitting there thinking, have people watched Tottenham lately? Like, forget the results. Like, people want to sit there and overanalyze our results when we're going through periods of good or bad form. And when you were looking at the Tottenham performance, if that's really what we're going off of, it's not been great. And like when you look at Chelsea, yeah, they've had a little bit of a rough period, but their play has still been good. Baseline Tuchel has still been a lot more than baseline Conte with Spurs, regardless. And I was just very surprised about the discourse. I saw a pretty easy, Chelsea win coming, and Saul got a performance. When Saul gets a performance, there's issues.
I know. I mean, it's difficult because when a team is getting a team that people respect, get results, they're not questioned as much as us. Like there's still people that say, how does this Arsenal team getting these results? They don't have any good players. They're not a very good team. And so I just noted that the narratives around both teams are very different. For me personally, when I look at Spurs and, if I'm taking my unbiased hat on or my biased hat off, I just see basically the same thing, Son and Kane heavily, carrying the team, counterattacking football, sit in a low block, not a lot of build up play, just very basic what they've been doing post Pochettino. So it's just, I haven't seen much different. I just think that they were going through a small manager bounce, and the teams that they had run into had went down a man or weren't very good. They're scraping results like against bad teams. And I know that people say, well, that's what you did against Norwich and that's what you did against Burnley, but we were building up into something. And I'm not sure that I see that they're building up into something. I feel like Conte's kind of biding his time until he gets to a transfer window and buys new players. Do you get the same feeling that they're kind of just in a holding pattern until they can get some fresh blood, in the squad?
Well, see, the trouble is I saw the same major holes that I did with Nuno with Conte, but Conte added some benefits. But the major holes, so the buildup in there was still really horrible. I haven't seen a coherent buildup pattern from them really consistently at all. I still haven't seen them fix the central spaces. When you watch Tottenham, there's still massive gaps in between, their back line and their midfield. And, that's where all the problems lay. And when you're really looking at it, okay, he made the distances tighter in a block for sure, no doubt. I can see that. I see that people are working harder in a sense, so they're crashing the box a lot more. But you're basically doing hero ball for Kane and Son. And for me, instead of having Kane drop, they're like, okay, we don't want you doing anything, but it still leaves a massive hole in the midfield. And I just haven't seen that fixed. Like whether it was Nuno or Conte. That was the biggest thing. And of course, Nuno for me, he had spaces both in and out of possession, so it was even worse. It was a double-edged sword. I get it. But like, just Conte solving the off the ball when they crash isn't enough for me, and especially when you're looking at in top 4, it's consistency outside the top 6, right? We've said this a lot of times on this stream and before. And even though people want to highlight the big team results and the performances, no one cares about that in a top 4 race, I'll be real. It never predicts it. And so what performances really predict wins in outside the top 6? That's typically possession. That's typically when your buildup needs to be great. That's when you face a low block. How are you able to really turn those iffy results and those defensive performances into real wins? And for me, if you don't have a great buildup, you don't have great spacing in the midfield, you struggle to do that in the long term, right? And so that was always my biggest worry with Conte. And I never doubted that he would fix some of these defensive stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're not fixing those on the ball stuff and you're not fixing the quality, I mean, everyone knew he wasn't getting money in January. This wasn't going to be a Newcastle level turnover to get somebody to put them on the ball. So for me, very, very difficult to predict them really improving much. And, they hadn't really faced anybody, but not just that, but they also hadn't faced many teams away. A big thing for why teams fall outside the top 4 race is not just that possession thing that we were talking about. It's really your form away. Heck, Arsenal, we've seen how we failed in that aspect so many times. We've had excellent home records and, really consistently, Arsenal have had a great home record for almost a couple decades in general. Sure, there's the odd season where we struggled like COVID and whatnot, but in general, that's never the issue. It's normally matching that away record, and Spurs have been awful away. And, look at this game here. For me, this was a full strength Spurs lineup. Okay, you maybe want Reguilon in place of, Doherty. Maybe
They were
you want
calling for Dyer. They were calling for Dyer and saying that they missed his distribution. I was like,
That's kinda dire in
dark
its own right,
times, dark
It's
times.
just it's just I don't know. I felt like there's been a rude awakening coming. I don't think that they've faced many away days quite yet, and I don't think they've had enough of a sample. In their 7-game, 8-game unbeaten run, 5 of them were home wins against mostly relegation side teams, and so if you're looking at it with just cold hard facts, if you don't have a sample, how are you gonna project a different performance when the performances have been the same? Even in these wins or these draws, even though they haven't lost, the same thing you've seen from Conte has been steady Eddie. It's not like I saw, okay, one game, we had a 20-minute stretch where it was really promising. So maybe there's something to look forward to. I always argue that in some spaces and stuff, when you even looked at our run, our patchy form at the beginning of the season, even Norwich and stuff like this, they weren't doing 30 shots with XGs of, 2 or 3 in those games. Even the result didn't go our way. Norwich was tough, but we had 30 shots on target. So you're sitting there, you're like, okay, if things come together, we get a pivot, we get our back 6, kind of things that, I said that would improve our creativity even more. You're like, if my baseline is 30 shots, that's a lot better than 1 or 2. That's a lot better than 5 or 6. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Tough.
it's interesting. It's because obviously we're saying this like, well, we don't have our game tomorrow, which it would be nice going into our game. Kind of, it's fun when your rivals lose and then you're like, cool, like we can go out there and play. So we don't have our game, and we're gearing up for probably one of the biggest North London derbies in recent times, like in terms of what it's going to mean for both teams. So it's nice to see them, kind of have like a bad result here, but it's outside of the league. So we'll see what happens with them. But in this cup, I was looking forward to playing Liverpool tomorrow, but this leg has been postponed. Everybody kind of knows that. Woke up, saw the little announcement. I was like, oh, shock, because they had already kind of put on their Twitter that they had asked for the postponement. So I was like, okay, you figured that they would get it. And it's sparked a lot of like chaos
Controversy.
online. Yeah, for sure. And not just from Arsenal. It's from other fan bases were upset about it as well. And how I kind of I think there's different elements of it where first and foremost I want to say that like I don't think COVID is a laughing matter. So I'm not saying like they should have to play with COVID cases or anything like that. I think that's the misconception. It's like, well, how can you say we should have to play? We have COVID cases. It's just the lack of clarity around how many COVID cases, like, is it COVID cases plus injuries? You can add those together and get to a threshold, or is it just COVID cases, period? Because when you start talking about adding those two things together, then if the threshold is, let's just say, 7 COVID cases, if you have 4 injuries and you get 3 COVID cases, the game is called off. And to me, that's a little bit like what's happening here. But I'm not saying that that's what's happening with Liverpool. I don't know what's going on in their camp. I'm not behind scenes, but it is kind of like, this would have been a good time to play them because their squad is not at full strength. And I said this on the terrace earlier that I don't give a shit. Like, I'm really one of those people, like, I don't need to play them at their palm. We already did. We did that early in the season. We got whacked. I don't care. I want to play them when they don't have their main team because I want to win a trophy. So call me like pathetic, whatever, but this is a good time to play them. So that's why I'm disappointed. But what are your thoughts on the whole postponement COVID issue thing?
I think so. There's half of the problem where you look at COVID, and for me, there's a lot of anxiety because fans don't know the rules. It seems like people are just making things up in scenarios as they go. So when you look, Arsenal fans are going to feel aggrieved because of our start of our season. Sure, we had 3 or 4 starters out, but the very next week we had additional 3 or 4 starters. Like, the idea that we had almost 6 to 7 people out at the beginning of the season was a major part of us going down at the Brentford game. And by precedent, from what's happened this season, we should have had that game called off. Many people said it from the start, but it's even worse now when you're getting these cases. But then what kills me is when you start looking at people like Leeds, who when we recently faced and had no COVID cases but massive injuries, and they still had to play. And by the way, they had almost 8 to 10 injuries themselves. It wasn't like they had 3 or 4. So for me, it's like, what's the number? Is it an injury aspect? Is it COVID? Is it both? Is there a number of people missing? Is it like when you only have 7 people missing, it's not good? Because, I heard also that there were suspected COVID cases, and that's essentially saying, well, they have symptoms, but we don't have a PCR test confirmed. Plus, we have AFCON injuries. So there's potentially a large amount of people missing. And it's like, I feel strange that that's not been the case for somebody like Leeds, who had almost 8 to 10 people that were injured. Okay. And it sucks. But why wasn't that game called off, for example? If it's a number issue where you're like, there's so many starters or so many big people missing, that should be the same case for the entire league, where it's like, look, regardless of injuries, if you have more than 8 people missing, then we'll postpone it. But then we've never done that for any other season. Like, what kills me is, even with COVID, I get there's a transmission issue or whatnot. So maybe you want to halt the faculty or the facility where they're going. But at that token, there needs to be a number. There needs to be a threshold where you say, this is an outbreak. Therefore, we must stop him. And that's going to be consistent for every team. Not because Spurs did it, not because, Villa, Watford. It's not that you should apply on a game-by-game basis. There should be a rule. Yeah. There should have been one at the beginning of the season. If you receive more than 4 COVID cases in the space of 24 hours and your game is in 24 hours, it will be postponed. Something like that, for me, would indicate an outbreak, just medically and whatnot. But even logically, you get more than 4 cases in less than 24 hours, you're like, okay, something's going on, so let's stop the game if it's, in the next 24 hours. But we didn't see that. We didn't get clarity. So fans are anxious. And yeah, I'm with you, Jess. I don't need to face them at their best. I can win, with a depleted squad and be
no shame in my game,
because we've had to do it. We've had to play Man City without Mikel on the bench. We've had to play players without our ideal 11. And, our results, by the way, still got picked as if we had our starting 11. So you know what? I'm shameless. I don't care. So let's play them, and I really don't see it as an issue. And what kills me is, I think the Liverpool thing, half of it is injuries too, Jess. I don't think it's all COVID. It's basically they've got their AFCON players out, which are 3 people, Mane, Keita, Salah. And then they've got injuries to Origi, Minamino. I think Alisson is COVID, to be fair. Firmino, is coming back. So maybe there's 3 or 4 COVID cases, but it's in addition to 10 injuries. And then for me, that's when I start to get, hold on, you're mixing, because Leeds didn't get that benefit. When you've got
one of the things one of the things that has been like alluded to, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but that they didn't have a single goalkeeper. You know,
Mm.
all three goalkeepers have COVID or some issue. And what would just be interesting is that I think I think that the protocol now is that you have 7 days away and then a negative COVID test. And is that correct, George? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, and
Something
it's
like that?
yeah, 7 days, and I think 5 days isolation. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, they played on Sunday. So when did they get these COVID cases? They play on this coming Sunday against Shrewsbury. Like, it's just a matter of Allison coming back saying I'm COVID free, and they'll play a team. And it feels like don't want to play Arsenal, but Shrewsbury will do that one because it's probably a go anyway. You know, that's what it feels like. But I don't know for sure because I'm not there. But you know, for you, when you look at how now our schedule has been moved around, you know, that's the postponement has been moved to the 20th. They've moved Burnley to the 23rd. Does it give you any sort of like, that we now have to play the away leg first? Or do you think that that is a benefit to us or not?
Mhm. I think because this is a competition that doesn't have away day goals, it really doesn't make a huge difference. But psychologically, I'll just tell you, I prefer having a second leg because in my aspect, when you get two of these things, you don't get a goal disadvantage. So I think that really eliminates your preference. But for me, if you don't do the business at first, I'd rather in a bad situation have the security of my fans. Like there's just something about that. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it essentially means that, I've got a good environment to swing a result. It doesn't, there's no away day goals, so it's not like there's added pressure in that aspect, but it just gives me security of home last. And I do prefer that. I think if you do home first, you're basically saying, okay, I got to keep my medal away. And something that's, what we struggle with. So I actually think it's kind of a benefit, oddly. I hate the congestion, but the congestion was gonna be there regardless too, Jess, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, we also have like time off, do we not? Like right after the
we
Burnley
do.
game, there's that little bit of a break. So it's not like the end of the world, you know, but I feel like the end of the world feeling that was this morning on football Twitter was not coming just from Arsenal fans. It was definitely coming from Chelsea fans. I know that they felt a little bit like, well, what the hell? Like, we didn't get
Mm.
our Wolves game called off, and Tuchel was very like vocal about not getting that game called off, but now Liverpool's getting games called off. And so it just feels a little bit like, well, if we couldn't, then why are they? You know, so it's not just Arsenal. And it's one of those where we had kind of talked about this in the group chat that as annoying as it is, like this has to become some sort of siege mentality, some sort of, I think it has to roll on from the Man City game, you know, it
I'm
has
still
to.
I'm still more upset with that. I didn't even get a chance to talk with you. I'm not gonna lie. I think
Well, yeah, go ahead.
these things, they start to add up because that Man City performance was probably not probably, it was the best I've seen us play this season. And not only that, it was the best I've seen a team face City, period, this season. And it was a little bit of an injustice, in my opinion. I don't think it swayed the results. I was very keen on my podcast to say it was in our hands. We left a lot of goals on that pitch. There was a lot of players that we probably should have got the win with our shooting boots on, but the way that turned out and how that game did switch from refereeing decisions, it does put that siege mentality. And I mean, the beginning message of this season was unity. Last season it was trust the process. This was unity. And I think it's kind of poetic in a sense that you have something like that against Man City. Then you have something like this where what we've had to play every game, and now Liverpool with a little bit of trouble get their game called off. So then we have more congestion in the squad. I can guarantee you players are saying, "Oh, okay, so it's everything against us." And I don't know, Jess, if you caught it as well. We're being charged for how we handled the red card. Excuse me, I saw Manchester City players doing the exact same thing. And so, yeah, it does lead to that siege mentality. And people don't want to hear it. And everyone's like, well, Arsenal fans always say that they think there's bias. It doesn't help when you get some of those charges, for example. Why is Rodri or somebody or Man City not charged for Rodri's celebration? Like what is different about how we handled the red card if it was bad conduct? compared to that? How was that any different? So yeah, I think things are going against us, but the squad seems to be a different mentality where they use it as fuel. And I think Aaron
Mm.
Ramsdale is kind of like the embodiment of that aspect. Every time he gets abused, that guy loves it. And I want us to take that into fuel, because I think if we are to succeed this season, we do need to have a bit of a siege mentality of us against the world and just focus on ourselves. I've always said, focus on your own lawn, not your neighbor's lawn. And once you take care of business, that will get us to where we need to be. We don't need to worry about anybody else. So
Yeah.
it's all frustrating, but I'm kind of happy that the squad seems to be taking this approach.
Yeah, and I think we don't have the kind of team anymore. This is how I perceive this group that's gonna go into this woe is me victim mentality, because that's definitely not what you need to do, because we're in probably the trickiest period of the season where we're gonna be missing, key players. People may or may not be around because they may get COVID, injuries, fixture congestion. So it's a tricky period, and I think this is the period where if we can galvanize the troops, get through it, have that siege mentality, we can be looking at the back end of the season in a positive light, not chasing down fourth, but holding on to fourth and moving away from the rest if we can. And that's the difference, because if we go into that shell and we're like everything is against us, nobody cares, because if we don't beat Spurs and we don't beat Burnley or
Burnley.
whatever, yeah, it'll be basically like nobody's gonna be listening to us about the FA or the Man City game or not getting things called off. It's just gonna be, well, you got beat, ha ha ha. So none of this really matters. You have to use it as fuel, and that's what I'm hoping that the team does. But yeah, we'll definitely see what happens. There's about 130 of you guys watching. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I see you guys are asking questions about Isak and Vlahovic. I guess we can go ahead and start there.
That's what they're here
We are.
for. None of this soft factors. They're here for the transfers.
I know. It's like but I wanted to wait and make sure people were like in the room before we started talking, But this is what you guys came here for. We are doing Q&A, so if you guys want to go ahead and start dropping questions, you can. I guess we could just start off with the Isak rumors. I did do a full transfer show yesterday talking about Isak and Maitland-Niles, but obviously it was just me talking, and people want to hear your ideas as well. I know you're not big on a center forward signing now. Like you'd prefer like a midfielder signing, like for this particular window. But if we were to bring in a striker, or not even bring in a striker, are you interested in any of the names that are popping up, or do you have some reluctancy around them? Because we're talking a lot about strikers, and I think it has something to do with Aubameyang, and it's just fun to talk about it now. And I'm sure that the club is working on it. Isak, Vlahovic, Ollie Watkins, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Jonathan David, where do you kind of sit when it comes with the striker signing, and where is it on the priority list for you?
It's lower than midfield. I've always said, for me, I feel that, the issues that we have in our team are really midfield based. And, my biggest theory, as I've said on the show quite a bit of times, is, when you look at essentially a pivot in our back six, we would see creativity improve. And when you look at essentially our good form from Everton, that's really when Granit Xhaka came in. And of course, we lost with him in the team. But when you look from that point, maybe one loss and about 5 wins. And in those 5 wins, we had over 15 shots, over 2 XG, and over 2 goals in each of those 5 games afterwards. So for me, creativity definitely jumped up with a stable pivot. And then I'm starting to look at what was the best part of the Man City performance. Every time I ask people, because for us, that's the highlight, right? Like that's the highlight reel performance. What is it that you highlight typically? And everyone keeps telling me, and I agree with them, the 10 minutes in the first half from the 20-minute mark to the 30-minute mark when Bukayo scores, when we basically sustained pressure against the best team in the world. And my biggest argument has always been, how do we do that now, not for 10 minutes against the best team in the world? How do I do that for 90 minutes? What will give me that? And so there's a couple ways you can do it, right? Like you can do it with a striker that likes to drop in deep. That's one way. But does he help your middle third control? I don't know. Like, does he help you win duels? I don't know. Like, what was the big difference about Granit coming in? It really was those second balls, because he's actually been a little bit poor on the ball, if we're really being fair, in these games. He's been great in duels. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what has created this shot in the arm of creativity? And every time I go back, I basically think the more reps that you have in the final third, or the more attacks rather, is better than getting somebody that's more efficient. So if I had, 10 shots on target, I'd rather 30, even if, my percentage is 50% efficient. And so when I'm looking at it, I see midfield is probably the best thing. I think striker, I'd like to have that profile. For me, I view Martinelli as a striker, and I think we have that off the ball runner. So it'd be nice to have a target man type in the squad. It's just I don't know if I put him as high priority as other people do, and I don't know if how many of these people move in the January transfer window. I mean, it looks like, Vlahovic is the top topic on many people's mind. But when I look at the past precedent, how many big money signings over 40 million pounds have happened in January? It's very, very rare. And so I'm struggling that these names are going to be the ones that we want long term. And if that's the case, and we're going to wait till the summer, then for me, I use the January transfer window as like your super glue. Like, how do I fix this team with the least amount of money to keep my powder dry, just in case we do what I felt we could do and get Champions League? Like, if you do that, doors open. You know what I mean? Like, if striker and center mid are your biggest positions that you want to fix, for me, it doesn't make sense to have a good player when you could have an excellent one in the summer. Like, I really want that upgrade to be your 8-year pick, so to speak. So it's troubling for me. I kind of use this window as like, uh, what can I do with the most versatile people? So I'm looking at some loans, something like a Genie Wijnaldum loan, I think is very, very smart. He can do that Odegaard role that we're thinking. He can help us stave over the Partey and experience. I've said in the past, me, Jess, Awu is like a very big favorite of mine. I think we need another wide playmaker, an option in the left half space, something I think to give us something a little bit different. And of course, I've mentioned, Dennis Zakaria in the past as like a pre-contract, something easy we can do to fix up Mohamed El Neni. But these things aren't major money. Like Houssam Aouar is max 25 million pounds. Zakaria will be free. He's a pre-contract. Ginny is a couple million in loan fees. Like, they don't impact what you could do in the summer, but at the same token, they give us something more that this squad needs for top four. Because I'm seeing people score goals. Like, I don't think scoring goals is an issue. Again, bar Manchester City, we've scored over 2 goals in the last 5 to 6 games. So I don't know if goals are an issue per se. What did you feel about it?
I don't know. I feel like we're working on the striker now. That's what it feels like. So we're getting tidbits of it now because it's transfer window time, but it feels like a summer signing. It feels like something that won't come until Aubameyang or Lacazette is gone. And right now, somebody asked in the chat box, how much could we get for Aubameyang if we sold him in this window? And if I'm honest with you, I cannot see him leaving this window.
Well, especially with AFCON, right? Like, who leaves in the middle of a turn? Like, is there even Torreira? We had to wait. We didn't complete, but we said we'll buy you in the Euros, but we didn't complete it until it was done. So
yeah, that's why it's a little bit like, what are we doing here? But I understand why we're getting links to, or a lot of strong, not really links, but like a lot of talk around the striker situation, because Aubameyang's not in the team. We know that that's the next big signing. It feels like there's a big gap opening there, and whatever we're going to do, we are probably working on it now. I know in the chat, people are asking about the whole Vlahovic, like, because there was a lot of news that had kind of come out about it. Like, it felt like the news had changed just slightly, that he wasn't like rejecting us, but it was more like procrastinating to see. And then now Piatek from Hertha Berlin has just been bought by Fiorentina, and Aikane was also bought for Fiorentina. So do you think that has anything to do with us, or just Fiorentina like kind of future proofing themselves because they know Vlahovic is probably going to go soon?
I don't know if it speaks to Arsenal specifically, but it definitely speaks to a potential late bid on Vlahovic that may be too good to turn down. And I
Yeah.
think they're also not the type of club to panic by in a sense. Like they are a pretty decent club when you look at Fiorentina. They do look at really good scouting, and they plan ahead. To me, it screams if I get a huge offer for Vlahovic that I wasn't expecting late in the window, I don't want to be caught with stuff in my hands and basically saying I've got no replacement. So I really see it just from a Fiorentina aspect. They're future proofing their late window possibilities. I don't see it with us necessarily. I mean, if you're really going to go by links, the idea is Vlahovic doesn't really want us or our project, which again I think is hogwash. It for me it looks at agent speculation, like the agent is drumming up interest for his player who's approaching the last year of his contract. Um,
Mm.
and I just
Yeah.
don't know if I would buy somebody for 55 million pounds when in 6 months it's 35. Like it is a weird one. I think Fiorentina are future proofing though, for the possibility that he goes. So there's definitely interest, and they're like, maybe I don't like this because it's the middle of their season too. So that's how I see that. I don't know if
Well,
it's us.
what do you think about our interest in him? Like, I find it odd just because I feel like, okay, so let's preface this by saying that, like, I don't think any of us are really clear on what Arteta's striker is, because
Mm,
he's played a lot with Aubameyang. Like, none of the strikers have been players that he's brought in.
yes.
These are players that he inherited. And Lacazette seems like, I kind of defined him as the best band-aid right now. Like, he's the guy that works the best at the moment. But he's
Mhm.
played Aubameyang quite a bit. He started off with Aubameyang as center forward, and he also likes Eddie Nketiah. None of them are alike. So just because Lacazette is the thing that's working now, do we really think we're looking for somebody like that? Vlahovic is completely different than even like a Jonathan David or Isak. Like, I don't even know what to call him. Like some sort of hybrid of a holdup and a what? Like, what do you think about
Like,
Vlahovic and our, like, being linked to him at all?
because it's not even hold up too, right? Like if you actually look at a lot of his stats, he gets dispossessed quite a bit. Like for a big man, he's not somebody that's a dominant Calvert-Lewin that will pin center backs like that. He's somebody that can come in. He's got a really good first touch. He lays it off and then he goes and he has movement. He's probably the best ball striker on the market. I'll say right now. That's the one thing. Like I think that's his biggest pro. You give that boy
Yeah.
time and space, he'll find the back of the net from anywhere. He's extremely efficient, but it's because ball striking wise, there's very few on the market like that. But in terms of somebody that likes to drop in and link, which is what a lot of people's ideal is from like a false nine perspective, that's not him. He's also not the kind of guy like somebody that's going to sit there and hold center backs back and be a backboard. Like he doesn't quite do that, and so he's kind of a mix of somebody that big frame, not really great aerially either. Like like he doesn't score tons of headed goals, but again, you give that boy time and space. He's got really good movement across the line. I don't think he's elite in a 5-yard burst for a little bit of Nashville Gooners bingo there. I don't think he's got an elite burst, but he's not slow. But again, I think he's a mix of profiles, between things. Like if you're comparing him to a Jonathan David, that's completely different strikers again. And like a Jonathan David is not a lone nine, by the way. He's a second striker purely. I know him very well from Canada. It really frustrates me when people say he can be on his own because he can't. He's a quick mover who latches onto loose balls off of somebody like a dominant Calvert-Lewin.
Could he play with somebody like Martinelli, because Martinelli is essentially another striker in our system?
In
Is that
terms
something
of
that could work?
Jonathan David,
Yeah. Does
they're
it
kind
have
of
to be a 4-4-2?
yeah, like for him, he's like Antoine Griezmann in a sense, but not as technical. Okay. And he's a lot more better work ethic. He works best off of somebody like a Diego Costa. You would need somebody like that. For example, right now at Lille, he has, Yilmaz there, who is somebody who's a very big, kind of backboard. And, he works off of him for the loose balls and stuff like this. So, yeah, Jonathan David is kind of that second striker, and I feel like we already have something like that in Martinelli. Like if you view him as a striker in a two or something like that, or even alone, that would be Martinelli's role, right? Like I would think we would need somebody like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin for that to make sense, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, for me, like, and then when you start looking at Dominic Calvert-Lewin's another profile who we've been linked with very heavily in the Athletic in the summer, you know,
Yeah.
I think even Charles Watts said Dominic Calvert-Lewin is someone we would seriously be looking at, right? Like he is now on the other end. He is kind of the complete nine. He is somebody for me that occupies center backs. He is a lot more of a backboard, but he's somebody that can run the channels with elite aerial ability. But he doesn't have that dribbling that people love Isaac for. So like you've got in all these strikers, basically how I sum it up is you've got people that have really great skill sets but are flawed. Everybody is flawed in some aspect. There's no clear standing output. And then for me, I really struggle spending more than 40 million pounds on those type of signings because I find them limiting, I find them not versatile, and I find that worrying because we have a great group of young strikers right now. And if you wanted a project, we have it. Like between Balogun and Martinelli, if they were playing for, Fiorentina and they were banging in 10 to 15 goals, which they were perfectly capable of doing with experience, but they would be flawed at this moment in time. So for me, I kind of struggle. I lean towards if we do a striker position though, to get kind of a facilitator, but somebody experienced. So I do lean more in the Ollie Watkins or the Ivan Toney camp more personally because they're in the 40 million bracket range where I know that they are flawed, but I'm not wasting massive money. Whenever you get above the 60 million pound mark, I have this rule. I don't know if other people do, but you have to be top three in the position in the league. You have to be buildable for 8 years with a club, and you have to be versatile to multiple formations. That for me is a 60 million pound marquee signing. And
Okay.
if you like Pepe is an example of it going bad. Like, it's like that's above 60 million pounds and he doesn't hit those criteria. So as a sporting director, I'd say no. So just to save
Mm.
that, I use basically the 40 million pound mark. And so the big people that fit that is, an Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins, people who, by the way, are older. They're 26. I think we need experience in that position. We're losing so much experience in that department. It doesn't make sense for me to get another 21-year-old with faults because I have that.
Mm.
I have two of them, and
Yeah.
but yeah, so like that's kind of my thinking with it, where ideally I'd like somebody like that. And an Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins, they have the ideal of the leagues. They're homegrown, they don't take time to adapt, and they're not big enough that you wouldn't have a big signing in midfield. So I think, yeah, signing a proper number 6 for me is my bigger priority. I'd rather do the marquee signing there than the striker.
Okay, so we'll get to the midfield because I think I have an interesting question there for you. But like, what do you think Adu's going to do in terms of the striker signing? Like, I've been challenged a couple times from people saying that I was wrong about Adu, and I feel like I don't know if I'm wrong about Adu just now because like what we want to see is that he is a top director of football because that's what Arsenal deserve. We deserve a top manager and a top director of football. And so setting Arteta aside just for a second, because he is building up credibility day by day. With Adu, I feel like it takes more than one window to build up that credibility. And the window that just passed, or the window that passed over the summer, was very successful. But I think it was also because those types of signings are harder to get wrong. The 25 to $30 million range and below is easier. It's easier to get those right than the big signings. So what I want to see this time around before I'm like, oh yeah, like he's turned the corner, like we know he's a top DOF, is one, can he sell players? Can he move players on? And two, when we're on the cusp of Champions League, if we've gotten there or we just barely missed out, what do the signings look like? The striker and the central midfielder, does he get it right? That I feel like before we start saying and start changing the narrative around Adu, we can not be on his neck as much and call him barbecue man. But yeah, like I feel like he needs a little bit more time before I say I was wrong. But what do you think Adu's gonna do? Like if you're had to guess, like, because we're heavily linked with these guys. We're heavily linked with the Isak and the Vlahovic, and you've said Tony and Watkins. We're less linked to those guys. What do you think Edu's going to do?
I don't know. He's a wild card because I don't we know much about the structure. Because also somebody that we're not mentioning is Richard Garlick, who we also don't really know how that functions in and how those dynamics work. Like for me, with a Richard Garlick, the process becomes a lot more streamlined, more so than past windows where sure Edu will be the contact person, but Richard Garlick does the actual negotiations. Like the actual does the deal happen or not really depends on Richard Garlick a little bit more than it does Edu at this point, right? And so I'm really wondering how that dynamic kind of goes. I think as long as you get wins, it becomes tough for you to say bad Edu. If I have to be fair, I'm not somebody that has felt in the past that he's somebody to get us there. Personally, I think the eye for choosing was more Mikel. But hey, if he gets the players for Mikel like he did this summer, it works. You know what I mean? Like it's very few teams have gone 6 for 6 in signings, right? Very few teams have done that. So I struggle to like really hammer, him as a personnel, really, even if I'm kind of questioning him. I'm quietly like, I'm not questioning you, but I'm like, I'm waiting to see what you do. I'm just undecided. Neither I hate you, I'm neither I love you. I'm just ready to see what you give me. I'm ready for the first course. I got an appetizer. I'm ready for the first course. And I think that's because this is the big summer where we're going to have money. A lot of things are going to be a little bit different this summer. Again, more wage bill. I don't know if people know we have 5 free players with almost 370K a week off the wage bill doing nothing between Kolasinac, Lacazette, El Neni, Chambers. Like we have players that will give us money again. So it's like we're going to be active. And a lot
Isn't
of
it nice to go into transfer windows and not hear we don't have any money? That was like 5 years running where we didn't have any money and we knew we weren't going to really do anything. Doesn't it feel good to know that we will be active in the market?
Yeah, I mean it's awesome to see. I've always felt the case. I've always been one of those. Probably the comments will hate me, but I've never been. I don't like Josh. I've very much been a person where I bookmark the Cronkies and Josh growing out for me. And I felt that this was coming. I felt that this was coming with full ownership. I felt this was coming where this was Josh's guy too. Like Mikel was Josh's guy. There's a certain level of ego in having his first big sports franchise that's so global work. And I think he's going to give him his marquee signing, right? Like he's going to give Mikel okay, here's your present, Mikel. Like you rode with me through very tough times where I was stringent. Even in the last window, we had a scattergun approach. He hasn't had a marquee. You could argue Thomas Partey and Ben White are probably his versions of a marquee. But look, with Champions League football, we know the level has been 72 million. That was predating Mikel. Like that was our transfer record. For me, I feel as though we have that capacity to at least match it. And Mikel hasn't had that yet. So there's a lot that can get you 72 mil or in that range. Like that's a big range. A lot of people, if you listen to my timeline, my dream is Declan Rice. I think that boy is something special and he's worth the huge, huge fee for. And if I had to like mitigate funds, I do it. I do the 40 million pound Tony if it got me 100 million pound Declan Rice every day of the week on Sunday.
Okay, so this is where my question comes in. So, like, we may or may not get Champions League, and we've had these conversations before in our group chat and I think if we don't get top 4, we'll barely miss out. Like it'll be within like a point or two.
Yeah, it's always
like it'll be close. But knowing that we'll make big signings, but we know that Champions League could be the difference between getting a Declan Rice or not. So we talk a lot about midfield. First, do you think we need 1 or 2 midfielders?
2.
Okay, so we're on the same page here. So give me your midfield shopping list outside of Champions League and inside Champions League. If we qualify or if we don't.
Okay.
Go.
I think what's good is I think Dennis Zakaria, I would like either way. It's a free pre-contract. It's somebody that for me replaces Mohamed El Neni and Lucas Torreira. Great in the squad. It's a backup DM with experience. So that would happen regardless. Yeah, Champions League is Declan Rice, and for me, he's the marquee. We were willing to. Well, I don't know. Links were to Lautaro Martinez, who were what? I think that fee was almost
It was like
reaching
80, I thought.
80, maybe
It was
90. Like
high. Yeah.
that's big. Like that's Declan Rice money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the playground I want to play in. Now, not for me. Everybody below Declan Rice is a seriously um, bad, or not bad, but a seriously big downgrade from that. I don't want to be facetious, but I'd look at the surrounding situation with Basuma. Don't want to be weird, but there's a little bit of outside of the pitch issues there. I still love the boy. I don't know where that's gone, what's going to happen there. But at the end of the
Yeah.
summer, he's got 12 months left. So for me, I'm looking at somebody like him or even a Boubakary Samare from Leicester, who I still love, who I still think is going to come good. Um, or an Ibrahima Diallo, somebody we've also talked about on the channel. Those are some like plan B types to a Declan Rice. Because for me, those are the best sixes that I see right now. Everybody else is going to be a lot more project based. You could go to your Boubacar Kamara, who we've also talked about, but he also is somebody that's very young and needs to learn the position. So you're not getting a for sure starting six in that aspect. And a big logic for me, Jess, has been I always ask people when you look for like a lone six or you look for a striker, right? And you want these positions for a long time, right? Like 5 years or something. Which is really frequent on the market more often, a striker or a really good lone six? It's normally a striker, right? Like there's
Yeah.
strikers every year. Like even if
Yeah.
Vlahovic pops up in a year or two in the World Cup, we're going to find something Alvarez from Argentina that's going to be amazing, and you're going to be like, oh, we should sign him. So for me, I never worry about you know somebody like a striker, a winger. These things crop up a lot. A lone six,
Hmm.
that is something that I think comes every 5 or 6 years. Somebody that's going to be top three in the world. And look, I love Basuma, but even from Rice to Basuma, there's a gap in terms of what you can achieve with that.
Yeah.
So those are my plan A and Bs, I guess, but they're a big gap for me. Like it's a big jump. Like Declan is the top, and Basuma's here, and that's not to say that Basuma's bad, but like that's the level and how I see it.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a difference in what you can start looking at and where you can shop, based on having Champions League qualification. And so, I try not to get too excited about the ones that I know for sure are going to require that. But what I will say is that if we were to get into Champions League, I would like to do something a little bit different to you. I would like to get Zakaria if we can, no matter what, because
Yeah.
that kind of solves our issues in the pivot. Really, for me, it's like, okay, well, because I don't know what's going to happen with Granite. I don't know if he's going to be kicked to the curb or not, but we have enough pivot players. But there's also somebody else that is kind of on the market ish that I would like us to look at if we were in Champions League, and that's Frankie de Jong. I just feel like
Oh,
he would change like everything. Like I just love it. Like I love that guy. Like, and I know like maybe the physicality is something that you have to look at, but he does tackle and stuff in La Liga. Good players adapt. Like really good players adapt. I don't see, if you had Dennis Zakaria and you had Thomas Partey in your team, why you couldn't play with Frankie de Jong in your midfield and make it work. And I just think that there's like always been a connection between Ajax, Barcelona, and Arsenal, and he would fit in to what we're trying to do. But he's definitely like, you need Champions League to even start asking about this guy. What do
well,
you
same
think
with
about
Declan
Frank?
Rice. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
those are the plan
yeah,
A's. I call them the plan
yeah.
A's.
Well, what do you
Um,
think? Like, what do you think about Frankie De Jong? And like, obviously, there's a huge difference in playing styles between Frankie De Jong and Declan Rice. What do you from you? Like, since you're the tactical mind, what would be the difference between the two of those?
so the biggest difference is Frankie de Jong confirms a three. Look, he
Mhm.
can play. Look, these are both 6'8s, I call them. They're players that can play both. They're like Thomas Partey, but they're very specifically much better in a formations. Frankie de Jong is a lot more specific than Declan Rice. I think you can put Declan Rice in a pivot or in a lone six, and he will do perfectly fine in the future. That for me is the biggest difference between the two. Whereas I think Frankie de Jong, you got to surround him with runners too, because it's not even just the physicality, but the fact that he's the type of lone six that dictates play, but he won't run. He'll need a Conte at right center mid to run for him. And he'll need a creative eight, but somebody that's more athletic, somebody like a Gravenberch, somebody like,
Mhm.
the Bellingham, would be the plan A of that regard, but somebody that is creative but is a runner and athletes. And that's how you can surround a Frankie de Jong to really, really thrive. Because both of these guys, with Declan Rice, though, he can pop in the center back. So can Frankie de Jong, but you're going to need more twin towers. You're going to need your Gabriel Saliba to surround him. Ahead of him, he's got to have his Conte or his Chouameni. Those are somebody on the market now with maybe a Gravenberch or a Pogba. Like, that's the type of midfield, somebody that's athletic ahead of him that can work.
Mhm.
Declan, I don't think you need that. So Declan, you put him
It's
as a
more
lone.
plug and play.
Yeah, but you put him as a pivot also, and forget the three
Mhm.
man midfield. Then he's perfectly happy. Like, he's fine. He can totally do that aspect. And the biggest thing for me is I want us to get to the point where within game, Mikel can signal and we can go between a pivot and a midfield three and not
Mhm.
change subs at all. And that's very difficult. There's no team in the world really that can do that. But that's also why I like Awar. That's why I like Declan Rice. Like, between those two, for example, let's say we start with a pivot there, and you got Awar at left wing. You can make that into a midfield three by basically subbing on your link striker and saying, okay,
Mhm.
Awar, drop deep, and Declan, go in the middle there. We'll take off one of the pivot, and then boom, you've changed. Now, Frankie de Jong, you can't quite do that. But what he would do is he would basically confirm that three. He would block Patino. That is something I will say because they're very, very similar. I
Yep.
think Frankie de Jong's more of a passer than Patino. Patino does dribble a bit more, but they're very similar. So you are blocking that path for me. But again, he's world class, right? Like, so it's not like you say no because you block a youngster's path who you don't have there, right? That's not the reason you don't get him. But it's a concern, right? Because he's something that he's
Yeah.
something that we really look towards. And I think Declan really would do well with a Patino ahead, like as an eight. So Declan doesn't stop your future or your present, whereas I think Frankie is a very specific type of profile. We've actually got the center backs for both of those players, so I never really worry in that. But
That
there's
guy, like, literally, when I watch him play, I get chills. Like,
yeah,
I'm like, this guy
yeah,
is so good at midfield. Like, it's insane. Like, but also Declan is a good midfielder as well. Like, not even good. Like,
mm,
he is approaching, like, his levels this season have been top one, two, three in the league for midfielders. Like, if we're being conservative, like, you know what I mean? So they're two completely different things. But something that's I feel like is interesting is like Arsenal are a huge club with huge
mm,
pedigree. So when we start talking about getting into Champions League, we're not talking about a team that's never been there before. I think you instantly gain back your credibility if you were to get Champions League. So when I see people saying like, well, they'll, Frankie de Jong would never go to Arsenal, you're dreaming. If we have Champions League, yes, he would. Like, if there's no other options that are better, and the better options are like Bayern Munich, he's already been at Barcelona. We're a Premier League team. There's no better teams than in the Premier League and Bayern and Barcelona in terms of pedigree. Real Madrid as well, but he probably wouldn't go there. So
mm.
unless Bayern Munich wants him or one of the top three decide that they want to play with Frankie de Jong, which I don't think if it's Chelsea or Liverpool that leaves Man City, who knows what they're doing. They look pretty settled with Rodri as far as I can see.
And
Why
they've got a
wouldn't
great prospect, Romeo Lavia, who's coming up. Like, City are
so
stacked in that.
So why wouldn't he? Like why wouldn't he? Like I think we have to start changing our mindset a little bit because I think there'll be options available to us, even if we miss out on Champions League, because one, the Premier League is the best league in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like 1 through 6 are some of the best teams in the world. The other, you know what I mean? The other leagues really don't have that. So it's that, and then Arsenal are getting their pedigree back. And some players will want to be a part of a project where you're going to push us into the Champions League. So I think we have options. I think the options are there.
It annoys me with fans, I'll be honest with you. Like, have some damn pride. We are the Arsenal. We are not some. I know we've struggled, in recent years, but make no mistake about it. But a Champions League Arsenal, in terms of the options and the pedigree that they can attract, is a different level. And yes, we can compete with absolutely everybody on the market as well. Because not only that, we have the money, we have owners that have invested. Okay, we have shown that we spend. Okay, but the ambitions of this club are winning the Champions League and the title. Okay, if you're not going to shirk from doing that, and that's your basically, I call it, that's what everyone expects. Okay, you have to expect to want those players. Those go hand in hand. You don't do that from constantly doing the Dortmund approach. Those aren't teams that sustain. So if you're going to do that, absolutely have some pride. We absolutely are able to get there. Are we there yet? No. But with Champions League football, we're in London, we're in the Premier League, we're in the best league in the world. London's a hugely attractive city. Of the teams, we are the most successful London team. I don't know who needs to hear that, but we just factually are. So, in terms of legacy, style of play, in terms of project with a coach and a young team, the youngest team in the league, where, you're talking about us improving, Jess, but this is like the baseline. Like, we literally only have up to go because they're so young, and for me, there's a lot of things that could come together this summer. I really think this is the season. You know me, I know we've differed about where we see ourselves ending. I've always said this is the season for me where I see us top four. And I think this is the biggest opportunity. A lot of people, even if you were away from that top four or top six challenge, and if you were lower at eighth, I think we can all agree we're in it right now. Like, we're in the fight. Whether you think we do it or we not is neither here nor there, but we've put ourselves in a position to compete for that. So while we're there, of course you're going to dream about the possibility if you get to the top of the mountain or if you don't. So for me, it's all about having plan A and B's, and then just making sure that those profiles line up. So even if Declan and Basuma are very different quality, they do the same thing. Right? Like, they are people that are more of a defensive anchor. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense for me to go from Locatelli to Basuma. It doesn't make sense for me to start to see links, even if we're not in the Champions League, right? Like, it doesn't make sense for me to go from Neves to Basuma. Like, I think those
Nope.
two links. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think they're
That
like,
makes no
they're
sense.
different. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Graham Brooks says, in the long term, I think the club are interested in Guimaraes, Sanchez, and Svanberg. Gotta let me know what's your beef with my boy Bruno Guimaraes. That's my boy. Love him. I'll ride, die for my boy. Why? Okay, so with those
Mhm.
midfielders, in particular, Guimaraes and Sanchez, who we have been like kind of linked with,
Yeah.
what is your apprehension about those players and how they fit into the current squad?
Strange, because Bruno fits the best of those three. He's the most versatile of those three. Sanchez is very much that right center mid who's more of a dribbly kind of supplement to a three in a three-man midfield, and he doesn't make sense because of who we have with Odegaard. With even Bukayo Saka in that space. Like, for me, he does not make sense there. We have so many right half space playmakers that it doesn't make sense. He's not a wide playmaker. He's an interior, and he's a dribbler. So it doesn't make sense. Svenberg, he does make sense. He's more of that passing, controlling kind of type of six. He's not quite the destroyer, though. He's not my type, but he does fit in that aspect. Bruno, yeah, like, for me, he's
At least
definitely
say
the one.
something nice. Say
So
something nice.
here, I will condition it in this way. I look at Bruno replacing Granit Xhaka. When you buy a Bruno Guimaraes, Xhaka won't play in the team. when you do that, you will lose off the ball, but gain on the ball. And so for me, I look at it as a net positive, where I think he's a 6'8", but he gets dribbled past quite a bit when he's higher up the pitch. And with Leon now, we've seen him more as this 8, which is the role he's going to play. We've seen it with Granit, where the left center mid is going to be a little bit more advanced than that deeper anchor. And for me, the most important part of Granit Xhaka is he hasn't been great on the ball, but off the ball, he's been immense. And we can't lose that when we replace him eventually, regardless of what you might feel on Granit Xhaka's quality. But you can't not have that defensive ability. And it's not that he has zero, it's not that far. But for me, he gets dribbled past far too often. And in that space, Tierney is unlikely to be behind. I need somebody in that half space that is very resolute, but also on the ball, we gain quite a bit. So that's I'll go positive now because I've gone negative before. With him, there's a different quality on the ball. My biggest pro of Bruno Guimaraes is not passing range, but passing selection. He is incredibly intelligent about when to go long, when to go far. He can dribble in and out of trouble, but for me, his best aspect is picking a pass between the lines. So when he receives and he's on the half turn, he can dribble out of trouble quickly if someone presses him, but he's got a phenomenal between the line pass. But he also knows when he needs to recycle. He also knows when he needs to go wide, and he can control a game simply on his own. He is that kind of metronomic 8. And that's something that we don't have. It would be a profile we don't have. He can do the lone role, but again, he's not great because a big part of it is, defensively, he's not great there. So that's why he's not great as a lone anchor, and it's less.
Do you think Arteta could teach him this positioning awareness type of stuff? Because Granit Xhaka was somebody who, before Arteta came in, was known for bad positioning, and do you think that that's something that can be mitigated by coaching and making sure that he knows where he is? Or do you think it's just a straight up player flaw that can be fixed?
Positionally, you can fix, and I do think he has positional faults, but you can fix that. I'm not really worried about that. For me, it's when you do get turned, do you have the aggression and the ability to get the ball back? That's something that is very difficult to coach because that's an athletic limit. And that's something that we've seen with Granit, by the way, who is also positionally loose, and we fixed him. And so he'll look better. I'm sure, Mikel can fix some of these things, but ultimately, I don't want to be in a position where we're being run behind again. I look at midfield and I don't want to have to critique it and say we couldn't compete running wise. If we do a Watford, I don't want Abdoulaye Doucouré bossing that midfield. Like, I've seen it before and I'm tired of it. And so for me, I feel as though we have enough technique in the front line that I never worry about technique because I know that we're going to get to the point that we're such a good team that we're on the halfway line. And that's where we're defending. What we saw versus City is going to be our 90 minutes. And so for me, I always look at how can I improve what we saw at City, for example. So, if I'm taking away Granit Xhaka from that team at City, what do I have to replace? I have to replace those second balls. I don't know if Bruno does it. I think that Basuma would, for example. He's not as good on the ball. He's still good, but he's not as good as Bruno Guimaraes. But at least he can run. Like for me, it's the case of if he is out of position, if he is in that bad place, can he get it back? Because Tierney's going to be really high up the pitch. It's really more important on the left for that to be the case versus the right, because on the right, we have an inverted right back. So even if you do lose that battle, you've got an extra body back there. But the left, that becomes even more of an issue, the off the ball, and are you able to compete in transition more than the right, in my opinion. But again, that's I don't want to be rude, but prison and all that fun stuff with Basuma, I don't know. But like that profile, I would prefer on the left.
Interesting. There's about 300 of you guys watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Yo-Yo asks, is Xhaka for Arteta, is Xhaka like Arteta's safety blanket the way Walker is Pep's?
In a different way, absolutely. For
Kyle Walker, snuggling. Xhaka, he's back in the team.
Well, you know what he is? He's the kind of guy that people are like, he doesn't fit for what you would think a top team would need. And the same is like with Kyle Walker. You look at City, they're amazing ball to feet, they're technical ball carriers, and then you've just got this physical phenom. And they're so underrated. Like the big reason why, by the way, we dominated so much was because Kyle Walker wasn't there. Martinelli doesn't get that joy with Kyle Walker, 100%. And for me, I think Mikel uses Xhaka's off the ball presence and his leadership to step up the line. That's why we've seen this big change. I mean, you even look back at, I think the opposition tells you about your weaknesses, by the way. Like I always believe that. And what people choose to attack will tell you. And I think despite Granite's, really big physical limitations, typically we don't really see him get, attacked, so to speak. It's normally on the opposite side. So for example, City, where is Kevin De Bruyne? Kevin De Bruyne was on the left, our right. Why was he there? He switched. He was on the right. So why did Pep choose to attack the right? And my logic on my channel really was, we haven't stopped the entry pass into midfield all season, and we had a gap. And Thomas never knew when to step. And Thomas was a lot more of an anchor in previous games. So he was thinking, if there's a hole, let's attack there. He didn't think so on the left. So for me, if I replace that body, I need to make sure that body is similar. That's why he's his safety blanket. He feels that if Granite's on the pitch, that's a side of the pitch that the opposition can't attack, despite his limitations, despite his ceiling. But off the ball, it's something that he gives this team.
Yeah, for sure. People hate hearing it, but we've been so much better since he's been in the team, and you can't really dispute it. Yo-Yo also asked, would Bruno play ahead of Sambi or with him if he were to come in? What do you think?
I mean, see, I see Sambi a little bit more higher up. I prefer him higher up, very much like a Thomas Partey. He could, in theory, because Sambi's played as a 6 or as that anchor. We saw it versus Burnley. We've seen it in other appearances, and like Bruno is more of an 8. I actually don't even consider him a 6. I don't know about you. Like I know he can, but he is an 8. Like very much for people. So he can, in the same way that Sambi can be a 6, right? I just don't think you make the best use of Sambi in that position. You probably leave him a little bit isolated because Sambi also has some issues tracking runners. Like it's not a great.
You don't really want Bruno and Sambi playing in a double pivot together in the Premier League.
No, you'll need a Fabinho with Bruno. Would work great. Something.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah. I think that's why, like no matter what we do, we need to get like a 6 with legs, if that makes sense. Somebody that can cover space. That's where Dennis Zakaria would come in. We don't have any big space runners in our midfield. I think Elliot made a really good point I feel like it was the instant reaction for the Man City game, that Thomas Partey is actually a small space player. Like he's good in tight spaces, tight areas, and nipping the ball like around people and stuff like that. Like even like his like octopus thing is about being near somebody and making the right tackle at the right time. But he's not really a big space runner. Once you're past him, you're pretty much past him. Like that's pretty much it. And so if we could bring somebody in that has a little bit more leg to them, like Samare, somebody like that who can get back quickly, cover a lot of ground back and forth and side to side, that would be good. And I think that that's something that Dennis Zakaria can do, even though he's not a Fabinho type 6. Like he's really not that, but he could give you some of the legs that I think that we miss. Do you think we're missing some legs in midfield? We don't have any big space runners, do we?
We don't, and that's really why. But also, I've always said that Partey's that conducting 8, and so people always misinterpret what I mean by that. But I call him our Thiago, and I've said we needed our Fabinho. Like that's how I see that partnership very clearly, and that is a big space runner. So that's why all my picks are, Declan Rice in the plan A. He was just phenomenal, But then Boubakary Samare, Ibrahima Diallo, somebody that we haven't mentioned, but somebody that I love. At Southampton, he's a big space runner as well. So yeah, I think that's the best complement for what we have in Thomas Partey. But also, Jess, I'm also thinking in the future with Coutinho, with Aziz, with Emile Smith-Rowe, with like twin 8s, what kind of profile do you need in that lone 6, a big space runner? So right. They fix the present, but they also fix the future.
100%. What made you support Arsenal? Everybody knows my story. I'm not going to say it again. But you, what about you?
Yeah, like I was very small. I grew up in a soccer family, so like my grandfather played professionally in Greece, and so I actually did not too bad myself here. But honestly, when I was really young, I just loved the color red, and it was thank God I chose Arsenal, which I think was just A on the list, and I found that jersey, and it was the first red jersey I saw, and I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I was like, okay, I like that jersey, and from then on. I just kept buying it, supporting them, and of course, as I was growing up and I played, I loved the way that we played. You know,
Yeah.
don't let the young face fool you. I'm a little bit older, so yeah, I loved. We were playing in a perfect time for me. Our eras. When I was 8, 9 years old was our most successful. So very lucky to see that. But yeah,
That's a simple one. That's way easier than mine. But yeah, for sure. Liking the jersey and just being like, yeah, cool. This is where I live now.
It's so lame because it was just like I was already like such a soccer family, so like we were watching all the Greek games or whatever, and I was like, I don't like green. Like that was what my grandfather played. I was like, I want something
I
red,
don't
and they're
like
like, they
green.
don't have red. So,
It's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. So like the Coutinho rumors, what do you
Mhm.
think about those? Like just convenient because of Kia Jaraption? Do you think there's anything to it? I mean, they were saying that he was close to Aston Villa, but then the other day he was close to us. So what do you think about Coutinho?
Um, so with Coutinho, he fits in the Awar mold. He is a wide playmaker. I don't think he's the quality that we need, and for the wages, it would be really strange. But he does fix the left half space playmaker. Like he is a left half space playmaker, and he'll give us an option there. He's just not my option personally because I think
Mhm.
he's not quite a presser, but he is a dribbler, right? So it kind of it makes sense that he's the profile, but I wouldn't go there because I think wages, motivation wise, it's not something that we need to repeat. We've seen that story before.
Yeah, for sure. Coutinho, he just looks so he's giving me Jaime vibes, that whole like, oh, I'm
If
just
we're going
dying over
old, can
here
we
in
go Ginny?
Spain.
Why don't we sign a petition? If we're going old, go Genie Wijnaldum, please. If we're going old,
I mean,
let's
at
do that.
least he was here like 5 minutes ago, so maybe he
Yeah,
can like just
yeah.
rev up the engine and get back to work. So you're all for that Genie Wijnaldum Band-Aid then for January?
Massively. I think it is the smartest. I've said it on my channel in the past. I think it's absolutely the smartest thing we can do because it plugs the Partey hole a little bit deeper. He can totally play with a Grant Xhaka, but also a Zakaria if we were to bump that up even 6 months and buy it early. That's a great little pivot option. But I also think he offers the Odegaard role, and people might question like why. In role, when you describe Odegaard, especially what he did at Man City, that is exactly what Genie Wijnaldum can do. He can do a pressing drop, a pressing trigger. He can overlap out wide, cover spaces, but also he's an excellent third man runner. So for me, for a loan, doesn't get much better than that. And also, it's not like we have to keep him, So he gets us over the hump.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people yesterday were down for it, and I was like, cool, fair enough. Dope Gunner asked, who do you think will be the next Hale End player to make the step up to the first team? I saw a picture of Charlie Patino and Omari Hutchinson and
Salah Adin.
Salah Adin. Yeah, like they were going to be involved in the Liverpool match. Any guess? I mean, I think it feels like it's Patino, but can anybody else make the jump as well?
Yeah, Brooke Norton Cuffy, phenomenal right back. You
Brooke
know,
Norton Cuffy. I love
Yeah,
that
he's
name.
he's passes the name test, no? So in terms of like, yeah, he's a right back. He's a Kyle Walker regen in terms of what we're looking at in profile. He's phenomenal. And he's somebody I really see that's really dominated that U23 space. People that have improved are like Tim Akinola and actually Joel Lopez, who I've not been a great fan of, but they've really improved with Kevin Betsy. But I think that Brooke Norton Cuffy is the most ready from the group that people might not know. I think a lot of people have known Salah Ad-Din. I think a lot of people have known, even Keto Taylor Hart, who's going to go out alone, who everyone knows. I love Keto. But I think those are people that and Miguel Aziz. But I think Brooke Norden-Cuffy is definitely a surprise package that I would definitely look back.
And I've already given my 2 cents on this one, but Graham is asking about Douglas Luiz from Aston Villa. Does he fill that aggressive midfielder kind of sit-in 6, or are you like, nah, not so much?
I prefer Ibrahima Diallo. If we're going to go for that level, I think he's closer profile for what I like there. But okay. Yeah, Douglas Luiz, I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't love it though. I'd feel like we got a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'd be like, I was looking for something more. So,
oh my goodness, no, I hear you. I think he's a good player. But again, he would fill a squad role in my mind. Like, he wouldn't be somebody that I'd be like, yeah, he's going to come in and start. And so the El Neni role kind of needs to be filled with somebody that can actually play as a 6. And so it would be somebody like that. It would be somebody like Adenis Zakaria. My apprehension about getting Douglas Luiz is how much it would cost and how much more could we spend to get somebody a little bit better. I don't think Aston Villa would be trying to give him to us for 30 million. I think they'd ask for something stupid like 40 something. I don't know. I just don't feel like it's something that we could get over the line easy. So it's kind of like, meh, whatever,
he doesn't move the needle, does he?
No, yeah. Then that's why I said he was like a squad player where you look at your bench and you're like, oh my gosh, we got some good people on the bench, but he's not starting, but yeah, for sure. I did see another question in here. About, let me see, there's so many. Tony says, what do we do at right wing over AFCON? Who plays behind Saka over the next few weeks?
I really want to see Odegaard there in one game. I would really love to see Emile Smith-Rowe in the hole, get Saka a break, and I want to see Odegaard in a free right wing role with somebody to overlap with him. I think he could really, really thrive there. An outside academy choice, you could get Amari Hutchinson in. I don't think he's ready though. So for anybody thinking that, I think he's just not physically developed. So my biggest thing is I'd really want Odegaard free there, because I think that Emile could provide that overlapping option, and it would give us a lot of the dynamic Saka does when he comes deep. He helps progression, that left footer there. We're going to have an inverted, right back constantly. And of course, you got ball over passion or over there. So for people asking, thank you again. But Thomas Partey, I think, is going to be a little bit higher up. So I think that right winger needs to be really good about coming deep into midfield, but also attacking the box. And I think Odegaard could really do well there.
Vibob says, Odegaard is doing phenomenal in the 10 role. Would hate to change that. ESR is versatile and he can play on the right. The one thing I will say about Emile Smith-Rowe is that, he is very versatile and he can play off of the right or the left or in the hole. But what we saw, I think his passing range is the only thing that has kind of kept me from being like, yeah, he needs to play over Odegaard in that 10 role, because once Odegaard started to kick on, you could see that the vision was there. But then I forget what game it was. I think it was against maybe Leeds, or it was one of the game, Norwich maybe. Yeah. And ESR comes on and he does the no-look pass to Lacazette. And it was almost like he was making a point, like I could pass too or something. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like that. And I have to say, I love Odegaard and I think he's doing an excellent job. And I just like his personality and his endeavor and the way that he goes about things. I was so worried about his lack of athleticism. I think we all kind of know that Odegaard is not the most athletic one out there, but he gives it his all. And what he has given is more than just work rate as well. He's actually surprised me, especially because I was so Madison forward, but I wouldn't mind to see Odegaard and ESR in the team together and give Saka a rest. That sounds good enough, you know?
I mean, I think they would work phenomenally well together. I mean, I've always said that Emil Smith Rowe is a 10 for me, and anyone that watched the academy knows that he's got the passing range. He's just such a shy boy. Like he hasn't shown so much of what he could be. You know, that reverse pass that you saw at Norwich, he was doing that for fun in the academy. You know, when people watched him, everyone saw that free kick swerve that everyone likes to, you know, quote on the timeline. Like he has the technique, you know. He is very much a small space player, but he's a big transition threat. And the big thing for me is it would put Odegaard central. Like I don't think what people are realizing is if you put ESR already wide right, which he can do, he's gonna be forced to come in. Okay, and
Yeah.
the big thing for me is with Odegaard, you want him central and you want runners around him. And if you're gonna have Lacazette drop in, you're gonna have or ESR vacate the space. It opens really the whole pitch for Odegaard to do what he wants. So that's who I would like at right wing. I still think Emil is going to come back with a vengeance into the team. He needed the timeout. I felt it was very smart management from Mikel. By the way, we don't say that too often, but I do think we're going to see him offer something else. And Spurs is the perfect game for Emil. If I don't see him, I'll be very upset because you look at those central
Over who
space.
though?
Well, for
Because
me,
Martinelli's been killing it.
I don't think you can replace Martinelli right now. In the form that he's in, he's got to start for me. But if you're looking at the role of what, you know, Odegaard was doing in terms of sitting on Rodri and that role, I think Emil is perfect for that role. I would even love to see what him and, you know, what Emil and, you know, what Laka could do. I've always had this weird galaxy brain thought. I'd love to see as an experiment of Emil and Odegaard together, where Emil plays this false nine role in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think it could really work together. I don't think it's a long term, but it's more of my like out there coachy things where I'm like, I could fix you. And I could see what he was doing at Villarreal, but I was like, that wasn't the time to do it. You know, don't experiment like that. But I really could see them work quite well together because Emil will burst into the space Odegaard won't, but Odegaard will pick the pockets that Emil won't. And getting those two close together and close combination just does, you know, wonders. I think the more combination players you have, the better.
I mean, how crazy has it been watching Martinelli over these last couple of games? You know, I haven't gotten your commentary basically on the performance against Manchester City, but wow, like I was speechless during the player ratings because I was just like, what have we done? Like, what is this player? Like, it's actually
he should go
like
out on
insane
loan, though.
watching it.
You know, he should go out on
He
loan
should go
and
on
prove
loan.
himself.
He should go on loan. No, I mean, I'm honest. Like, I was kind of like, well, have we overhyped him? Are we putting too much pressure on him? You know, maybe he just needs, but I also felt like he needed time to get back into the team because of his injury and learning how to press at the right times and not expend energy for no reason and all of those types of things. But he's not scared of anybody and he's just becoming something very scary. And Ramsdale actually said that once he gets his like adult grown man body, what are we going to be really dealing with? You know, it's insane. But what have you made of Martinelli over the last couple of games?
It's not a surprise to me. Like I'm very much a person where there's a unique development curve for everybody. And, you know, I know even like, because earlier in the season he was struggling, right? And like we were asking ourselves, like, why is he struggling? You know, for me, you just arrive at different points, and there was nothing for me that really he was doing much different, except for I think Mikel was teaching him tactically about the rotations a little bit more. I don't think he was quite understanding where he needed to be and when to turn it on. Now he does. You know, he knows when he needs to stay wide or when he needs to attack the box. You know, even at Man City, I don't know if you noticed, but he had a very reserved role at Man City. And in fact, he had kind of like a man marking job on Cancelo too. Like he was much more reserved and he only exploited the space when it was on. And that's when he looked most devastating between his runs, the top corner shot. He had something like 5 shots or 5 touches in the box and 4 shots, something crazy like that. So I think the big thing for me is with him, just let him play. I wasn't surprised about his sudden surge. You know, I wasn't surprised that he was. I knew he was always coming. And in fact, I thought that he would do it at AFCON though. But then again, I couldn't predict Oba doing what Oba would do. But I did feel that this was going to be his season, and he would put himself in the starting lineup. So I think for me, just keep doing what he's doing. There's going to come a period where he falls. Just warn everybody, it's going to happen. That doesn't mean he's crap, and that doesn't mean he's been space jammed and something's crazy going to happen. But I think he's benefiting from I don't know if game time is the right word, but I think being important. He's the kind of person that needs to be the guy. You know what I mean? Like he needs that pressure, and he thrives off it. So this team was looking for a reference, and he's providing it. And he loves that pressure. So yeah.
It's been a nice little ride here for the last couple of games. I can't lie. Like just watching them just go level for level, and there's levels to go up from here. And so, yeah, we will see. But we're gonna end it here. There's 300 and almost 315 of you guys in here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps the channel grow. Again, if you want to see George on his own channel, you can go to Ball Over Passion. Just put it in the YouTube search bar and it'll pop up. There's also George on Twitter at GeorgeV_AFC. I'm at It's Jacinho on Twitter, and you can also follow me at SheKnowsArsenal. And yeah, we'll see what's our next game on Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
So probably a preview if it goes ahead exactly on Friday. But tomorrow, we'll see what's going on. We're in the middle of transfers, and we'll just see what's going on, and then I will make an appearance at some point. I've really enjoyed, our time together. George, thank you so much for being on here with me. All of that.
Oh, it was nice to be back. Nice. New year, it's always good, and I'm just enjoying the ride because I think you gotta vibe when the goings gets going because we're Arsenal fans, so in a couple of weeks it could go downhill, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, this is a solo ask a question. Top 3 restaurants in Toronto before you get out of here.
I am a cheap date, guys. I am a Popeyes guy, and like I'm so bad. McDonald's, I don't know fine food. I'm so sorry.
Oh my gosh, George has let you down here, you guys. He's telling you to go Popeyes, but it's fine. No worries. I will look it up for you guys. No worries. But all right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Like that video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.